following program is classified G. It's suitable for all ages. We would like to remind our viewers that the views expressed in this program by our participating guests are solely viewpoints of them who take part and does not reflect the views and beliefs of the Derana Media Network.
Welcome to Gen XYZ, where we are going to keep up with our general notion of bringing to you contemporary subjects, topics that are relevant to the youth. And today, let me just give a bit of a context to our discussion and then to the individual who is with us. So we have seen a lot of the youth, more than it has been in previous years, are more prone towards finding something of their own, to going towards entrepreneurship. But one would say it's still not enough. Still, we can still do more. And that is exactly what we are trying to focus on. But something that we have seen is, given the lack of education or the lack of exposure in this environment, we see that most youth startups fail. And that in turn has a ripple effect on their mentality, and that might be something that they consider that people cannot do. But that is not what we want to build within our country. That is not the kind of skills that we want to build within the youth of this country. And to talk about exactly that and talk about why youth startups fail, we have an individual who will obviously come across when you talk about startups, when you're in the startup landscape. He's none other than Mahammed Fawaz. Thank you so much for joining us. He's the CEO and founder of Curve Up. That is just one portion of your portfolio. If I go to name everything that you're part of, it'll take a long period of time. But something that I should mention is you have spearheaded youth entrepreneurship. You have taken it to a different level. You have gone to separate countries and just within the discussion bring those out. And I'm pretty sure a lot of our youth will like to know your story in between all of this as well. My first question to you, let's just directly get into the topic. Yeah. Youth startups, we see that some fail. We see that some get demotivated with these failures, and we have heard statistics that go around saying about 80% or a large number of startups are bound to fail on their first try, and that you need to have a number of things like I really want to talk about timing with you. The very specific reason is the pandemic. Yeah. So my first question is, what are these characteristics that you should look out for? Why are youth startups failing?
First of all, thank you for having me on this. It's a pleasure. Directly getting into it, why most of this, than a failure, let's call it a challenge, right? Most of these startup, I don't call it a failure because sometimes when a challenge hits, a storm hits, it's all about how do you come back. But most of the time, I think when it's a youth startup, when you call it not a mature startup or not that have a lot of pre-experience in running organizations or getting idea into a commercial perspective, number one is focus. So I'll take it for myself as well. So when I started, I was 19 when I started my first startup. So as of everyone, for me, all the startup ecosystem, hackathons, everything was new. Get excited fast, right? So, but again, it takes some time for you to understand. You need to keep it on the focus because it's very easy to get distracted because.
If you don't mind me asking, how did you start? Where did you come from? Did you start in Colombo?
For me, the Colombo experience was completely new. I was an alien to Colombo about 10 years back. So when I came to Colombo for the first thing, I knew none, and I also I had a completely different experience. My first job was a call center executive in one of the online tech support service. And I still remember how the journey went and all those walking from Colombo to there, all of it. But when I wanted to start my first thing, I started a company called Global Tutor, live online tutoring. And I have to be very honest, no one believed, because in 2012 you come up and say, I want to do online live tutoring. We have enough struggle even now to go live online tutoring, but I was talking about live online tutoring, and it's just a kid after A-level and an HND. So from there to where it pushed me that I had to get my qualification to postgraduate and also get the context done right and to learn more about the empathy and the learning environment, the stakeholders of teacher to school system, the national qualification framework. So that's one of the things that I say is when I started, I was so excited because I was looking at the problem to solve, which was giving knowledge accessible, getting expert all around the nation or probably the worldwide to be accessible from your fingertip, right? But that was a problem I was solving. But it requires a lot of subject matter focus to solve step by step. So it's easy to get excited. So number one reason failure is sometimes you get excited a lot and you don't focus on the core problem and the amount of knowledge that you know about the problem more than the solution. Because you are trying to solve a problem. Most of the time we come to the solution and fix into the solution features. Right? That's number one I see. And number two is exposure, right? So we are not exposed enough. So we don't use it enough because there are a lot of people that has tried it before us probably.
If I can just interrupt you before you go into exposure, approach, just to clarify, an approach people take is find a problem, create a solution, then try and have a commercial idea. Is that approach wrong? How do you read
No,
this?
it's okay, completely fine. But again, when you say find a problem, how much do you know about a problem? What is your direct connection with the problem? Because it's very easy to find something sounds like a problem. But is that problem worth paying? Is there a certain set of target market who is ready to pay for that particular problem? That's where the question comes. Otherwise, we have enough problem to solve. Like, what is that segment? And for you to understand who will pay for what, you need to know quite a lot of knowledge about what's the problem you are solving than the solution. Because sometimes, and this is a lot of approach that we do in coaching and mentoring comes, right? A design thinking, solution statement, problem-driven approach. Because when you may find the problem is something else to start with, but when you go into the grassroots, you find a different problem. So solution landscape may have to change.
Okay, a lot of interesting ideas that you have given us. Before I go into the pandemic, I really want to catch on certain things now. You said design thinking. Even for someone who's a bit outside the entrepreneurial field, they would feel like, okay, this is not for me, I don't understand this language. But you are someone who had issues with English also at one point, and now it's almost perfect. So to those individuals, what do you say? Okay, can they not have a business? Can they not do entrepreneurship just because they're not aware of terminology, just because they can't converse in English? What do you tell those people?
To be blunt and honest with, until I was given an award in 2015 as a Global Student Entrepreneurship of the Award, I did not know I fit into a category called entrepreneurship. I did not know that I was being called as an entrepreneur. When I started 2012 with very limited exposure here, I did not know this hackathon, startup ecosystem per se. I went to them asking, okay, I have a problem, how can I solve? So it's completely okay not to know. Why I take myself as an example is I have an authority to emphasize that it's completely okay to start without knowing anything. But not knowing after starting a certain time period, there's a problem because you have not got connected to the right thing. Right platforms, right? So I don't think there's a prerequisite to be an entrepreneur. Absolutely, you are good to go. And I think now the access of information has come to fingertip. The moment you search something on your Facebook to YouTube, tell me what you can't access. True. Right?
Yeah. Something I want to, before we get into more details, to a more solution-oriented discussion, I want to really touch up on the problem part of all of this. Now, you very rightly mentioned that this was people are in a rush to find the problem and then create a solution, quickly get into the market. What are the things that you will feel are, these are the features that you should look out for? You will notice that these things happening, then you should be aware, okay, I'm going down the wrong path. What are things you tell people that try to start up a business and who are in that energy, who has that thriving and who try to invest everything they have? What sort of advice do you give them on maybe their observational standpoint when they're just about to get into this?
My first question that I would ask myself or anyone else is, how long will it take for you to give this a solution in a minimum viable product to a customer in a meaningful way? None of us, when we started, you don't have...
I don't want to interrupt you between the answer, but do you think we should go with a business plan? If you can integrate that into your answer also?
No, you need to have a business model. Because business plan, let's be very honest with, right? Tell me a single organization who has started with a comprehensive business plan and they are still sticking to it. But I think everybody started with the business model. You need to have a business model, how the business is going to make money and how market segment, and there's a lot market will teach you back. If you are a young entrepreneur, the market is going to teach you back. The moment you begin transaction, market will respond. There's a lot of teaching to happen. But that's where you need to know about a business model. Business plan will comprehensively develop. You need to have an idea about. I don't think that you need to have a complete solid. But if your business model is solid, I think there's a lot more way forward to go. So I would take business model is your most key important point, and that will draft into a business plan.
since we are on the subject of business plan, before we go into our first break, I want to ask you, is it important to have some form of structure in your modeling? Is it important to have some features that you should know about? I think you mentioned this. I would like to get like some details out of if someone who is watching wants to start an entrepreneurship, want to start selling a certain product. What are the keys? Should they always find some innovative, something new? Should they create something out of the blue? Or can they get into selling something that is already within the market, add value, things like that,
Absolutely.
subtle things? How do you get someone who may not have not creativity, but like who may not have that kind of input but wants to get into the field of entrepreneurship? What do you tell those kind of people?
All what I say is start, right? Because now the bigger fear we have is fear of starting. Forget about fear of failure, right? So fear of start. So my very personal advice to anyone who wants to immediately start is, there are a lot of models out there. Just let me quickly name for you, right? So if you take lean canvas, so business model canvas can be a little more advanced, but if you take lean canvas that comes from a problem-centric perspective to what is the customer target you are talking about, what is the channel, and what are the costing structure. This is one of the major reasons that most of us don't know how much it's exactly going to cost. And when somebody even asks how much money do you need for you to pitch in, and the second question is the runway, right? For you to understand how much money and how long do you need. So all this comes from a model. So lean model canvas could be a good model, and business model canvas. And there is also a canvas called pitch canvas, where you can pitch your idea in 3 minutes with a key value proposition and your customer segmentation. So you just search it around, right? So all these things gonna add value and make you think. So these frameworks are a very quick snapshot for you to understand what is the total bird view of it, eagle view of it, right? But just because you're filling all these models, it doesn't mean that you are an entrepreneur. There are people who has become an entrepreneur without knowing this model. But if you are a person who want to have a scientific approach, this model is something that's going to immediately help you to understand the problem and the space that you're solving.
A lot of important things being brought up in our first segment itself. I really want to get more context into this, and I want to get your understanding, since you are also creating an incubator of sorts. I need to get a lot of thoughts on that as well. We'll take a very short break. You're with Gen XYZ. Stay with us. Welcome back to Gen XYZ. We are in conversation with Mahammed Fawaz. He is the CEO and founder of CurveUp. Fawaz, I want to let's get into more details now. You head a platform that has now transferred into something more of a service provider. It was started in sort of this education sort of standpoint, and that's why you are important to this discussion. I want to ask you questions pertaining to the technicalities of an incubator. What is an accelerator? What is an incubator? How can it help come out of failures when it comes to entrepreneurship? But before that, just to touch on COVID-19, we'll just talk about the pandemic. Have you seen failures that have, have you seen companies that have started within this pandemic and failed because they haven't really timed themselves properly? They haven't really place them within the market properly. How have you read the entire pandemic situation when it comes to entrepreneurship?
Now, I'm a bigger believer every obstacle is a great opportunity, right? So this pandemic was a completely unexpected, as we know, let me not repeat it, but it's a worldwide down to everywhere, but that had a multiple impact on the entire ecosystem. One is economically and the policies, because you see the policy change were never this rapid apart from COVID. Like you saw import bans, a lot of policies were there. So there's a lot of dynamic factors into COVID-19 impact. But if I boil that down to a very startup opportunity driven impact, right? If you see, there was a lot of companies or organization pivoted because, like for example, organization who are selling like an Airbnb model for hotel went into a supermarket model, and they made some money and that's it, right? So that's again time and the focus, right? When there is such a crisis, certain impact, certain solution will last long, or certain instant, right? So very transactional, not transformational. Because I think there were opportunities, people jumped on it for a transactional purpose. Now, for example, mobile delivery. Just for an example, like me and one of another friend who was running a IT company. So we got together to automate a bakery solution called iStock Up, and we did more than 4 million worth of transaction in 3 months to bread to help a bakery run successfully. Right? But we knew when we were supporting, it was a very transactional, instant revenue, and that's not a lifelong solution. But there are organizations now, for example, I know a couple of organizations who took virtual deliveries like edutech platforms. Now, which they pivoted and they created the solution during pandemic, and they're still successfully running, right? Because they saw this impact. Although the number of digital acceleration, digital classes will come down after pandemic, but this will sustain, right? So it's all about what sort of problem you are solving for how long. So I see both factors where there are organizations who pivoted success and transactional, and there are organizations who thought they can live long and fail fast. Mm-hmm. So this all comes to how much do you know about the problem and the controlling effect. Mm-hmm. If you say the import ban is a very good acceleration for a local startup to start something, but let's not forget there is a scarcity of raw materials. Sure. Because we don't have a complete manufacturing ecosystem, but I think we are going to get there very soon.
All right. I think it's great that we connected to where we started the discussion, also on how well we identify the problem. I think that is something we can take across the entire discussion. Now, let's get into the solutions or part of this entire discussion. There are multiple elements, multiple ways a startup can benefit currently within the atmosphere within Sri Lanka. One would say it's a bit concentrated towards Colombo, but hopefully it can expand towards the next few years. I want to ask you, I just want to get your take on accelerators, incubators, and these elements that are present. How startups can get involved with them? What are the supporting tools that are present for startups to consider, to get education, even to get a basic awareness of what they're getting into? What are those things? Like, how can we move out of failure? How can we be better prepared for failure?
Yeah, number one is all about focus, right? If you see one thing, we are also experiencing a digital divide for the first time. All the information transformation is happening digitally. Now, if you are not digitally present or available, you have a preliminary problem of being accessible to all of this information. So that's digital divide in a very longer context. So after that, how much are you focused for you to get connected? But there's two ways, right? So there are set of people with all these national incubators, all of it, trying to reach the youth. But how much of youth are trying to reach this information? So that focus drives it much more better. Tell me, if you go on Facebook, YouTube, you search, awareness session on incubation. And Information Communication Technology Agency of Sri Lanka has beautiful programs starting from spiralation, and I've been involved in some of programs like Imagine IF at university level, Educate, Innovate for teachers. They've done quite a lot of work, but how much of people know this? And I knew spiralation this time also they had done quite a lot of application, I'm sure. And if you take the other way, like there are organizations like Lanka Angel Network, right, and Hatch, and a lot of organization who is willing to help startups. But how much of information is being transformed? And number two, and most of this particular initiative is also not just putting funds out, but telling them we will guide you, we will put a challenge statement for you, just you present your case. So I think that experience is important. I believe that experience is the education. So we run an enterprise support program for UNDP HackerDev, which is HackerDev Enterprise Support Program, where they make 17 plus organization or startup company who solve sustainable development goals, contribute to sustainable development goal, a social problem to be converted with a commercial gain for long sustainability. UNDP is doing great there. So we are an enterprise support program partner in incubation. What we give them is the experience to be an entrepreneur. And don't just teach them, and I don't think that you can teach entrepreneurship, but get them experience, like an experience lab, right? So that's what I always said. The selling market has a lot more to teach you than anything else. So, but for you to go to market, you need some hand-holding, guidelines, and most importantly, not to burn everything you have. How smart, minimalistically, you can go and approach the market, learn from the market, grow with the market.
All right. On this topic, I want to talk a bit about timing.
Yeah.
Now, we've heard, I think, on a lot of TED Talks and everything, they mention for most companies, there might be brilliant ideas, but bad timing. And timing has played a huge role in many businesses. What are your thoughts on that? Is that a key feature, or would you say that's a game changer when it comes to businesses, when it comes to entrepreneurship? Or is it mostly to do with passion, things like effort, things like how much you are willing to commit to the business or the entrepreneurship, the idea that you're behind. What does timing have to do? The reason why I'm asking this is basically because of the pandemic, and people may have timed certain things wrong. Is that something that people should be considering? Because again, this all comes back to my first initial thought process. Okay, can anyone do an entrepreneurship? Should we have this huge background knowledge before we get into this? Timing. What are your thoughts on that?
Timing has to be precise, to be very honest, very important. But I think, as you correctly said, passion, and you can find a different market. Now, where this time and competition comes to play is, the question is all about, if you are not the first time to enter, if you don't have the first mover advantage, what are the other ways to go and capitalize the market, right? So now, where the time is important as a first mover advantage, but if you go back from a first mover advantage point of view, amount of effort to put to make the market aware is huge in terms of time, in terms of investment. Right, because I can personally connect. 2012, I was trying to do online live tutoring, and I've gone to most of the schools in Sri Lanka and talked about it, and I can still remember that didn't make a huge difference. But today, that we are doing, during pandemic right now, we have 1,500 plus teachers. We have trained them about how to use online technologies to deliver better classes. So likewise, and let me take a very good example. Now, let's take PickMe for example, right? Just why I'm taking that is, I think PickMe entered just a few months before Uber, and PickMe started with 3-wheel. And today, PickMe is a big, very big landscape player in terms of a hailing app. Not more any hailing app, but part of a market. PickMe Foods to a lot of things. But if you really closely look at it, they're also creating their niche market, focusing on it. And still, PickMe is grown little more than Colombo, but still not a national wide yet. But there were a lot of other products came as a hailing app, which you can name a lot, search it a lot, but they didn't really take off the ground because of the market space and consumer switching strategy. Right? So I think it's not only about, time is not only about the solution or problem, it's also about where you solve. Mm-hmm. If you are solving into a mature market, that requires a lot more money, connection, and a lot more bulldozing in other ways. It's on the same market. But I'm sure all these problems exist across the island, across the globe. And just a quick thing now, take Sri Lanka is a smaller market. Let's believe that, right? So we are a 20 million plus population, which if you compare to Karachi and Mumbai, there are 18 million plus in the city itself. The concentration of market consumption is different. So we are 20 million distributed, right? So now for a solution to come in, I think you need to equally look at time and also the place. It's no more only the time. Where are you solving the problem? Although we say digital is a global passport, but where are you solving the problem initially is a very important context to the time.
Right. I think that also gives a lot of context to this and a lot of important light that you have shed there. I want to keep the discussion going on those lines. When you, as you mentioned, you speak to a lot of people about this, and you do, apart from your own business or your own enterprise, you take a step back and like help everyone else come forward also. What are the key features or key things you have seen in the Sri Lankan ecosystem that people get wrong or people get right, that you have to constantly mentor people about? You have to constantly tell people, look, this is something everyone is like a common mistake rather. So that you see in most startups. And next, I want to go into like some of again more on the tools end of everything. Do you see, are there common errors that people make? Are there common issues that you have to address almost all the time? Yeah. How do you read that?
So this is an equal difference between accounting and finance and transformation and transaction, right? Now, how much of knowledge that an individual startup has in terms of finance, not just accounting. I know they account their numbers, how much they spend and how they make, and their P&L is all fine. But financially, what is their forecast, right? How they been taking us. This is a special area that we also take a lot of partners. We work with even some financial expert when we design our certain incubating program to make sure these aspects are tailor-made right. Because finance is a key factor. It's going to decide about how you burn and earn, or whether you earn to burn or you're going to burn to earn, right? So this is very important. And how long you can burn, and if you burn this much, how much will you earn? So these are most important factor why organization will crash. Because again, I'm kudos to ICTA. I think they have found a brilliant framework to give loans for startup. But if you take it a few years back, all these startups, they know the idea will work, but they are burning if they're not started earning. So your financial credit system is not going to make you understand, okay, you are a viable startup, so you can't fund it further, number one. So coming down from that, the other major mistake is the focus and how much of quality you create for value proposition. Because as an entrepreneur, you easily get busy with managing all these transactional problems, but how much of quality you create in terms of value proposition? How much are you customer-centric, experience-centric? It's not just about technology or the wow factor about the solution, about the experience that you create to a customer. What's the problem you are solving? Sustainability, right? Because you can't sustain, the customer is the key. And this is where business model comes and plug in. Right? So if you need, do you need 1,000 customers or 1,000 instance of transaction? So can 500 customer give you the 1,000 instance of transaction? So what's the value proposition you give? Sometimes we easily get lost between, we just need 1,000 instance of transaction, but not 1,000 customers. Probably 100 customer can bring you the 1,000 instance of transaction. So I think these are areas we need consistent coaching. And the other one is definitely the framework to scale. Because I have gone through all these problems, right? I registered an organization just after signing a contract because I had a name reservation done, right? Because I have to have an official name for the organization, name reservation done, and I sign a contract, and when they ask for BR, and I get my lawyer to get it done, right? So you need to get this infrastructure. Now we go through an audit because we work with, one of the key model is coaching as a business service. So our business model is coaching, right? So when you do coaching as a business service, we work with a lot of non-governmental organizations. And I have to give a lot of credit to organizations like Chrysalis, US Embassy, a different organization like Oxfam. All of these organizations to work with, we need to be on a proper due diligence, including UNDP, right? So we need to make sure that we are on a very clear governance. Transparency is met right beyond the business. So this requires a lot of effort. So I think for each market, being a subject matter expert, and it requires certain prerequisites. For example, if you're on a production environment, good manufacturing practices, or ISO certification, or agricultural approval, or all of this come into place. So how much of value creation you do, I think these are areas you need to keep consistent coaching. And I believe you need to always get some sort of subject matter expert, although there are enough accessibility to the knowledge and a lot more people is supporting this.
All right. Before we go into our next break, I want to ask you this. Now, this may sound as if I think it comes from my inexperience of being being in this field. But let's say you have a certain amount of money. Let's say maybe about 100,000, and you want to start your entrepreneurship. What feature this? Again, I think you answered some of these questions, but I want to get a clarification. If you have a direct answer to this, please go ahead. Where do you think we should invest first? Should it be in our, let's say, education, in getting the right people, maybe? We have to keep a majority of the wealth or majority of our investment towards raw materials, towards the production atmosphere. What would you say is a smart investment when it comes to an entrepreneurship, or is it different to every entrepreneurship?
Absolutely, I don't think there's a strict formula so that all of us would have been in a different landscape. But there is a most potentially a common formula. The formula is egg and chicken, right? So you need to balance this both, right? For the egg to hatch to be a chicken, there has to be certain ecosystem done, so which can be your knowledge, right? For then chicken to go and grow, there is a time. So that time can be costed. So my personal way of looking at this is minimalistically know what you are doing and get to market, and there is a process of learning. You learn and market teach. You respond and again market will teach you back. So until you get the formula right. And this is what I say, there is lifelong learning, right? And entrepreneurship is not just way of making money, it's also a lifestyle. So when you are solving a certain problem, you go depth into that problem, amount of knowledge. And in 2012, I didn't have enough knowledge about entire digital learning landscape. And I don't even claim it, I know it 100% now. But day to day, we solve problems. Now, right now, we are on a mission with 1,000 teachers on early childhood education. The amount of problem we are solving day by day is giving my knowledge also. But that's a market response. So I think invest the money equally to have a minimalistic knowledge what you are solving and immediately get to a market through a minimum viable product. and there'll be a lot of process of learning the market will teach you.
Right. Again, a lot more important things that I want to bring up with you. We'll take a very short break and we'll come back. We're in discussion with Mahammed Fawaz. We're going to talk a bit more about the solution aspect of all this for all the young entrepreneurs watching this program. Stay with us. This is Gen XYZ. Welcome back to Gen XYZ. We are on our last segment. We are in conversation with Mahammed Fawaz. Just to give more insight into Fawaz, he has been an entrepreneur, a young entrepreneur, and has broken certain barriers. I just integrate some of that into our discussion. And now, Fawaz, our final segment, I want to talk about solutions, opportunities present. I want to talk about what the entrepreneurs can be doing as of now, things that they should really take care of. As you very rightly mentioned, a lot of resources are present as of today, and that is something that we can really consider, take into account. It's not like when you came to Colombo. So you must have had failures in your life. You must have had failures in your entrepreneurial journey. Tell us how you dealt with that, and tell us, we'll start in short there, we'll start on what failures you witness these days and how people can account for that and how you accounted for yours.
Yeah. So number one, I'll take my first and the last failures because there's a lot of failures, as everyone could say. So my number one failure was I could remember I went for an investment in 2012 with a concept with live online tutoring, which was existing. I was running it with a third-party solution. When I went in, one of the gentlemen who asked me, what is your exit strategy and ROI? And trust me, these two terms were Greek to me. So you won't believe, I went and took a course, CIM, because that was what I could afford, and that was what to teach you on a part-time basis, not as a qualification, it's a professional qualification, and did it just to understand what are these terms. And that's again knowledge. I'm talking about knowledge has helped me to come up with, and I secured, and I had 2 levels of investment going on. And the last one is I took an initiative because as an ed scale up, education technology, I went to Singapore for a couple of months, and I started an organization called Studila to create curriculum based there for a lot more thing, and getting Microsoft and a few other organization on a complete career progress development or continuous progress development as a very long-term thing. But because of a certain uncalculated risk, and I had to go through a massive failure where it took about 1.5 years plus for me to come over from that. And the process of that 1.5 years failure from my Singapore to now, I think has taught me well. And now it's probably 3 years back. But last 1.5 years, that knowledge has got. So failure is the greatest knowledge. Now, coming back to a second question about what are the opportunities and what are the failures that I see in the market right now. I think there's endless opportunity. Forget about, as you correctly said in the beginning, forget about being completely innovative, but there are enough opportunities in the market to fill it. Now, all the first generation, second generation companies who has been there in the market needs a change. That needs a young portfolio, young thinking, innovative thinking, right? So that itself there is an opportunity. And take how many companies who needs a digital presence. And there are immense skills out there, right? They need to connect to this, right? Number one. Digitalization, I think there's endless opportunity. But you can go industry by industry now. Now, if you take e-commerce, there are a lot more effort has to be done to make this digital commerce into the grassroots level. Because we do local SMEs, and out of 25 districts, we have covered 17 districts, which I can be very happy about. We have dealt with SMEs, right? So there's a lot of opportunity that solutions can help. Now, a solution, e-commerce solution in Colombo may take long time to yield. But locally, if you can run it in a minimalistic cost, there is an opportunity. So it's, as I said, what you solve where. There's huge opportunity, especially in education framework, there's a huge opportunity for engaging content. People are tired of video, and you got a 20 by 20 classroom into a 17-inch screen right now. Teachers are struggling. Teachers need, not only teachers, entire trainers, a learner per se, needs a lot of tools technologically. And the tool has to have an empathetic version of education. So that requires skills, right? And let's take a TV channel, for example. How much have you transformed during COVID? Right? How much of your resources that you take virtually now? True. How much of program has gone really standard? And as a channel, like how have we reacted, right? So I think all of this comes into play about opportunity, and huge believer that if you tackle an obstacle right now, there has to be an opportunity born. With all these policy changes, look out. And again said, like be part of any of this program where if you are a first-time entrepreneur, you at this time where there's a lot of dynamic environment happening, you need a lot of information. So one more thing that you can get the information to reach you. So I work a lot trying to see if the information can reach me, then I reach information. So I go, what it takes you to find out the different number of pages and subscribe to them. Yeah.
No, got you.
Yeah, right. So different number of pages and subscribe to them. Let it be Twitter, let it be YouTube, let it be Facebook. So you personally, without a cost, first you can decide how information should reach you. Nationally, internationally, what makes you to subscribe an international startup program, and it gives you alert whenever they're talking. Exactly. So I think, as you correctly said, there's a lot of resources, and sometimes it's because too much of resources, you get distracted way too much.
You're saturated with the amount of information.
Absolutely.
Something I want to speak to you, I don't want you to name companies or name other organizations when I ask this question, since once, like, we don't want to take that accountability, and secondly, you have to go and work with these people again. Now, let's say bigger corporations that are in the field, a question that young entrepreneurs, young startups will be asked is, what makes you sure, what is certain that a bigger company with much more resources will not acquire this, will not start this? Why haven't they started this on their own? And that this feeds into my question on competition, and that is also, one would say, a factor that makes startups fail, the overwhelming amount of competition. I apologize I really want to touch on that saturation aspect of information also, but I want to get your take on this since we have about 5 minutes left. How do you tackle that sort of competition? What about the bigger players? Let's not name anyone, but like, how do you approach those bigger players? Because if you go to think about that, then you can't start anything new. Because there are much better, one would say much more capable financially players that are already in the field. How do you separate yourself from them? How do you not get crushed by that the size, the sheer size?
I think number one, you have the answer in the question itself. Their size is a bigger advantage. So their size is big. The operational cost or something to start is big, but not for you. You don't have operational add-ons, right? So, and also if you really look any large organization, so I'm not going to name, but any large organization, not all the organization owns until the last part of the process. There's a lot of outsourcing happens, right? Quite a lot. Even certain companies outsource the entire product manufacturing, and they have become as a compelling branding organization, including the big FMCG organizations, right? So they don't produce, they white label. So you have an opportunity if you get into a process of manufacturing. Right, number one, and then you do not to think only on B2B, and probably your competitor can be a good collaborator, right? If you think it right, you grow to a scale, right? I mean, that is a completely different market, and you can focus a lot on the quality and a customer experience. Any bigger organization takes a lot of effort to create a personalized customer experience, but a small startup can easily do it.
So in the field,
with the customer a lot. Yeah. So that's what I said, market will teach you a lot. Now, very good example is during this travel restriction, I saw a lot of our local SMEs started tapping the small that allapukada like kada mudalali, started buying it from SME, not from a big organization, because of accessibility. Now, I think the size itself defines you an advantage why you should start, because you can focus on quality. Because when the size is big, you need to have a department to focus on the quality, but you are with a passion to solve that. They are solving 100 problems, but you are focusing on one problem.
That gives you an advantage.
Advantage, absolute advantage. And I see that will be a good collaboration. I also think from the top. So when we speak to a lot of this organization, I have never seen they have an intention to crush any player. But probably they, as you correctly said, the deal negotiation have a different terminology with the experience. Power imbalance, and as you correctly said, power of acquisition. So there might be situation you either get acquired or get lost.
True.
But I think the size is a beautiful thing, so that you can start small, and being small helps you a lot to focus.
Being small when work for your advantage is what you're mentioning. I think that's also something very important to bear in mind. I want to, like, given going to a conclusive note, Now, when you look at startups today, when you take the startups that are coming up, and there are entrepreneurs who are looking at this program as well, what do you think they should think about today? Think about when they move forward. Think about when it comes to their idea. What do you think they should primarily invest in? My question comes from this. Now, you also mentioned that you did a job before you went into this. Do you suggest entrepreneurs to maybe get some experience in a field before you go into and bring in? You might have the best idea in the entire world, but maybe get some exposure, maybe get some experience in a field. Is that important? Is that something that you suggest to these entrepreneurs?
Right. So I think there's no straight formula, but I would highly encourage for some to go. And just to correct you on that, it's not that only when I start. After my Singapore failure, I did for 1.5 years of a corporate job for 2 different organizations as a director, innovation and global reach, with all my experience to be contributed. And that taught me a lot. And throughout, whenever I'm running an organization, even right now, there are some engagement that I do personally, sometimes mostly volunteering and sometimes also on a financial rewarding way, but that to keep myself with the learning environment. I lecture sometimes, and I do visiting lectures, but not rapid as I used to do. But why? It's very important. So I think you're being part of a process versus a passion is 2 different things. So sometimes if you are part of a process, you also learn a lot how to run, and then you become a part of a passion that you also then execute it. And one more important thing that I noticed is all of the youth, including myself, most of us, need to get into the mentality of growth mindset.
Growth mindset, yes.
Scaling. We fear to scale, even right now, right? So most of us fear, okay, can I hire with a more expensive resources? Can I go for an office space? Can I increase the infrastructure so my customer gets a better experience? I think that's so important. That's where the quality comes. When you come on quality, your scaling and growth mindset, right, is playing an important role. So for me, the biggest blessing is throughout my failure, I had entrepreneurial friends around me, right? So for last 3 years, after my Singapore failure, I can't remember a day without where I had my closest friends in the startup ecosystem, which I earned during the startup ecosystem, who stood by me in terms of motivation, support to a lot more. And if I have to name, I have to name a lot, but there are some key people who is always there, been with me. So I believe in that particular network can be your net worth at some time.
All right. I think a very, very, very nice saying there. Before we end, we have about 1 minute, maybe 2 minutes left. I want to get a very brief take from you about risk assessment, how you tackled risk and how people who might fail have not really assessed that sort of risk. This question comes from the fact that you mentioned, okay, look, should we expand? Should we take the next decision in our entrepreneurship? Before making those decisions, what are the things that should go through your mind? Because we want people to take risks. That is something that entrepreneurship, maybe even the cornerstone of entrepreneurship, is taking risks, and that is important. How do you assess it?
Yeah. So for me, it's very basic, right? So if you're taking new normal, if you're taking a risk and you're going to go for a new height, so it's all about what if fails and what is the high height that you land back. That's the basic risk that I will do, right? So my landing back, how is safe? This is something that I didn't calculate in my Singapore journey. Because why? I landed so badly, right? And now I scale, but I calculate, I know what will I have to do if I had to go back, probably run more 5 hours extra doing the program by myself, right? So I know where I'll have to land back. So I think the best risk is if you can know what if it doesn't work. Anything that you are doing, what if it doesn't work? Let it be financially, let it be by scalability, and also let it be how you do it. And that's beautifully, it's not always the money is your investment, sometimes your knowledge is also an investment, right? So I would say sometimes not just put money and learn, because your failure has a cost, right? Financially or a time. So this is what you learn back. Sometimes you can also learn with the knowledge and go and tackle. So calculated risk, let you know what if that doesn't work. If you know that, you're good to go and risk.
All right, brilliantly put. Mahammed Fawaz, thank you for joining us, CEO and founder of CurveUp. We have been in discussion with Mahammed Fawaz about the startup environment and how startups fail, the youth startups, how they fail, and how you can overcome those failures. Thank you once again for joining us. I thank our viewers for staying with us on Gen XYZ. Join us again next week. I'm Dandita Nawasam. Have a great night.